So I'm using a Dremel tool to get started. If you don't have a Dremel tool, obviously go ahead and use sandpaper. Sandpaper works just fine. What your purpose here is to remove all the major problems. So these are things like knife blade cuts that went astray, planes of carving if you've used a knife to take off the bark. The Dremel tool works great for doing that a lot faster, but if you don't have one, obviously a higher grit sandpaper, maybe even like 40 grit would work well. Most of that sanding has already been done here on this stick that I'm working on, so all the like sandpapery stuff, I'm just going over the diamonds with the Dremel and anything else that stands out. Oh, you never get tired of that smell. Diamond Willow has such a unique smell when it gets sanded. This is the feature that I want to be most prominent in this stick, these three diamonds together. So they really have to be perfect. I don't want to skimp on the details here. I really want to make sure that everything's sanded smooth and there's no major glaring bumps sticking out. Just flows from one to the other. Oh, it's just so gorgeous. I love this. This side's really nice too. It really is like one of the best overall staffs. And you can see here, these are old worm trails or some kind of an animal that left a trail. And interesting, I didn't realize this, but I think the willow replaces it with material. So if the worm has burrowed a hole, it fills it back in with something. And I love that it goes dark like that. It's so cool. All right, well, this 80 grit has taken care of most of the imperfections here. There's the occasional divot I can't seem to get out. But I look down at from the side, I don't see a whole lot of strange irregularities. Oh, I should double check down here just to make sure I know I touched this stuff up. Just kind of give you a sense of what I do. I like to hold the stick like this and look down. You can catch the bumps, anything that's raised up when you look down, kind of like looking down the barrel of a gun. And you can see if something's sticking out. If there's a little knob or a time when somebody got a little excited with the blade. When you cut with a blade, you tend to cut in planes, and so every time you cut, it makes it multi-sided, and you have to sand those sides down so that there's no evidence if you want it that way. Some people don't like a perfectly smooth stick, and that's fine. This one, I want it to be smooth. It just begs to be smooth all around, and so I want to make sure that there are no like sliced planes, any evidence that a knife blade ever hit this. You can, I don't know if you can see that, but there's some lines there where the sandpaper is not hitting. So I have to sand that until I hit those lines, and then it takes them away. Yeah, even though like this is 80 grit, but it's from a belt sander. So it's a much more aggressive 80 grit. I'd almost call it 60, really. Just the way that it takes off wood. I find the belt sander sandpaper is much more durable. It lasts longer. Better choice for sanding. I think we're ready for the next stage of sandpaper. This feels like a pretty aggressive 120. I'm just going to see if it takes my scratches out or not. So the whole purpose of sanding in layers is that each progressive sandpaper, each grit that you choose, so I was at 80 and I'm going to 120, it should be able to remove the scratches created by the previous grit of sandpaper. And so this one, I'm just checking to see if it's taking away those scratches or if I have to work too hard to get rid of them. I think it's doing an okay job. It's very tempting to think you're fine and then move up to the next grit before you've done the work that needs to be done. And so I always try and do an extra round with each sandpaper before I move on. You'll also notice I'm sanding with the grain. If I sand this way, I'm just making more work for myself. I know this is kind of going against, right? This stick grew up this way. So if I scratch this way, I'm actually going kind of against it. I haven't really noticed a huge problem with doing it that way, but I'm just going to try and see if there is a difference if I go the length of growth as opposed to just one direction. I have sanded like this back and forth before, and I'm just seeing if there's a difference in doing it one way. So I am seeing that there's a bit more work to do with this grit. If I had 100 grit, I think I would have preferred to go step to the 100 first rather than jump to the 120. But I've already committed to it and it's coming off. It's not the worst thing. So I'm just going to keep going at this 120 grit until I've got the entire stick completely sanded. Once you've committed to going to a lower sand grit, and I would say anything like 100 or higher, it's really too late to be able to try and take out imperfections like this. So this particular one, I'm going to need to jump back down to a lower grit, maybe even, well, I don't know if I'll drill it off or Dremel it off, but I definitely need something lower to be able to address all of the messiness of that. So yeah, before you jump up, it's good to kind of keep track of what needs to be finished. Where is it? There's my 80 grit. So yeah, I need to actually hit that with a bit of 80 grit to take out some of that imperfection. Because there's no way I'll be able to do it with 120 grit. 120 grit and higher, I'm only removing previous scratches off. I'm not actually removing a lot of wood material. Okay, and then back to so it's really easy to get impatient when you're at one grit and you're just like, oh, there's so many scratches. Me, I always want to like go to the next grit. I'm always like, come on, let's get this over with. So that's a big part of doing a great job with a stick, is to be patient, to make sure you've thoroughly gone through the stick at each grit level. It's much easier at this stage for me to step back one grit and fix something than it is for me to go all the way up to say like 400 and then go and try and fix something that I missed. So I think it's best to be as thorough as possible at each grit stage of sandpaper that you employ, so that you don't have to go back and fix big mistakes. I do have to say, this is one of my favorite parts about this stick, is what makes this one absolutely amazing. So when this stick was found, this white part here was actually still living, and it branched off here, and there were two branches, this branch and then another branch going that way, and this branch here was dead. That's why it's brown. But the branch that was going that way was still alive, and so I carved it off and sanded it down so that it kind of blends into this. It's just amazing. It really is fantastic. And then look at how it sort of combines with it here. Yeah, everything about this stick is just truly a magnificent piece of art, of nature's art. And the place where I'm going to spend the most amount of time sanding, as always, is this top section from here to here, because this is the most visible. This is where any eyes are going to be, and especially on a white wood, it's going to really jump out if there's any scratches remaining. So I'm going to take my time and do a very good job of that section. I do a great job of the whole thing, but I spend extra time on this section because I want it to be like perfect. Now this is an interesting one here. This diamond here. Normally what I do is I'll gouge out the diamonds so that the pieces are gone. But this one, I just wanted to keep it maybe flat, just because this one here is kind of flat as well. And I'm glad that I did. I'm glad I didn't cut out this brown material and I left it in there. Now the question, do I go to 160? Nah, it's not even a question. I'm just gonna do it. I think from this I can just jump to 220 and be done with it. The nice thing is at this stage of it, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time looking for imperfections, because I've already spent the first 3 grits focusing on imperfections. All right, now I'm focused on just removing scratches, and as long as I cover every part of it and get rid of the previous scratches, it shouldn't take very long. Just before I move to the bottom part, I want to finish the top. One way to know that you're actually doing something is when you scrape, when you sand, there's actual material coming off. It comes off much more when it's removing scratches than when it's on a smooth surface. Sometimes with the higher grits, you don't know if it's actually doing that much. It just, it feels smoother, but you don't know. And so I always make sure if I'm dragging it, there's a little bit of resistance because it's removing scratches instead of just flat. I'll do my best to get in these little diamonds, but this isn't going to do a whole lot. Really faint scratches. Just make sure they're gone. I found these kind of nubs are magnets for scratches. So I've been trying much harder on my sticks to make sure these areas get a lot of sanding. There's really not much left after 220. 220 is it's good enough for paint on walls. Definitely good enough for a stick. After you've sanded with 220, if there are scratches, it's because you missed them. It's not from the 220, that's for sure. is another reason why I like belt sander paper instead of just regular sandpaper. This just falls apart in your hands, especially sanding sticks. No, I said not to do this, but I am still going to, for the final coat, I'm just going to sand the top with the 400. Just to give it a quick. With the exception of a dusting, this is ready to get finished. So I have decided that this is a little bit too tall to get into a package if somebody wants to buy it. So I'm going to trim it to 60 inches, or roughly 150 centimeters. Got my little mark there. I know I'm going to lose 2 of those little diamonds at the end, but it is what it is. All for the sake of making the perfect stick.